So in this video, we're going to talk about the Saga of King Hrolf Kraki. This does not have an attributed author to it. It is a medieval Scandinavian saga. You may think about it in like it's a combination of Le Morte d'Arthur, Lord of the Rings, and Game of Thrones. That's a pretty close approximation of what you're looking at with the Saga of King Hrolf Kraki. A bunch of crazy shit happens, but basically the saga is about dynastic politics and the contest over who's going to rule particular Scandinavian kingdoms, especially Denmark and Sweden, primarily Denmark. But there's a lot of fighting in Sweden. There's fighting in what's now the United Kingdom. People go places. But basically, this is a fairly drawn-out story about the struggles for power in medieval Scandinavia. And it starts right from the beginning, a few years before Hrolf is born, in a section called King Frody Kills His Brother, King Hafton. So basically, King Hafton is the ruler of Denmark. And King Frody, his brother, is not too thrilled with that because he wants to be ruler of Denmark. And so, basically, in the middle of the night, Frody comes to Hafton's stronghold and destroys it. He kills his brother, he takes over, and Hafton's two sons, Hrolf and Helgi, basically swear vengeance on him, and they manage to escape. They rally their nobles around them, etc., etc., and then eventually they sort of trap Frody in his feasting hall and light it on fire. Frody attempts to escape, but he's met by the warriors of Regan, who's the boy's foster father. He attempts to escape out a different door, met by other forces, etc., etc. And basically, he ends up burning to death in the hall, along with the boy's mother and Frody's whole entourage. At which point, Hrolf and Helgi basically are in command of Denmark. Helgi takes over as king. Hrolf goes to where does he go to? I want to say he goes to somewhere in like Northumberland in England, but I don't remember exactly. Then we go to this weird incident with Queen Olaf of Saxland, which is, according to the footnote here, roughly Saxony in Germany. Helgi wants to marry her, and we get this weird bit. I'm going to read it to you because it's fairly lengthy though. Helgi arrived at the feast and had himself placed in the high seat beside the queen. The two drank together throughout the evening. Nothing was lacking, and Queen Olaf showed no sign of displeasure. King Helgi said to the queen, "The situation is this. I want us to drink to our marriage this evening. There are enough people here for such a celebration, and tonight we will share one bed." She answered, "It seems to me that this plan has moved too fast. Yet I do not think that I could find a man more courteous than you if I were of a mind to attach myself to any man. But I certainly do not expect you would want to undertake such a union with dishonor." The king replied that it was fitting because of her pride and arrogance, that we remain together for as long as it pleases me. She answered, I would choose to have more of my friends here, but since I can now do nothing, you must decide this matter, and I expect you to behave honorably toward me. What she means by that is that Helgi has shown up with a large number of his warriors for a feast that she was having, where she does not have that many of her warriors there. So Helgi has basically shown up and been like, I've got this big army, time for us to get married. The drinking continued throughout the evening and long into the night. The queen was so cheerful that no one noticed in her anything other than that she thought well of the marriage. Finally, when Helgi was brought to bed, she was waiting there for him. The king had drunk so much that at once he fell down asleep onto the bed. Taking advantage of his state, the queen stuck him with a sleep thorn, which, according to the footnote, putting a sleep thorn into a person's ear was thought to produce a charmed sleep from which the person would not awaken until the sleep thorn fell out. So we've got some magic going on. When the last of the men had left, the queen got up. She shaved off all his hair and smeared him with tar. Next, she took a leather sack made for sleeping and placed some clothes in it. After that, she grabbed hold of the king and stuffed him into the sack. Then she called her men and had them carry the king to his ships. The queen next awakened Helgi's men, telling them that their king had gone back to the ships and because of a favorable wind was planning to set sail. They jumped up, each one moving as fast as he could, but drunk and confused, they scarcely knew what to do. When the men arrived at the ships, the king was nowhere to be found. They did, however, see that a large sack was there. Curious about its contents, they decided to look while waiting for the king. They assumed that he would be coming a little later. When they untied the sack, they found their king shamefully tricked. The sleep thorn fell away, and the king awoke, though his dreams had not been pleasant. He was now in a vile temper regarding the queen. Basically, after that, Queen Olaf gathers a large army. In the next section, we get this note that news of their dealings had spread far and wide throughout the different lands. Everyone thought it a flagrant misdeed to have mocked such a king in this way. So popular opinion is not on Queen Olaf's side. And Helgi has his revenge. Because what it says, basically he tricks Olaf into the forest. And it says, but when they came into the forest, Helgi was waiting there. He grabbed hold of the queen and told her that their meeting was an ideal opportunity to avenge his disgrace. The queen admitted that she had behaved badly toward him, but now I want to make it all up to you, and you shall wed me honorably. No, he said, you will not have that choice. You will come with me to the ships and remain there for as long as it pleases me. For my own pride's sake, I must take some vengeance on you after the ugly and shameful way you toyed with me. For now, she said, you are the one who will decide. The king then slept with the queen for many nights. Then the queen returned home. As just told, Helgi wreaked his vengeance on her, and now she became profoundly unhappy with her lot. King Helgi continued on his voyage, bringing war to others and acquiring fame. So basically, she plays a trick on him after he shows up with a band of warriors saying, hey, we're getting married, you have no choice about it. And then he rapes her repeatedly. So pretty fucked up. But it gets more fucked up, so stick around. Because what happens next is that Queen Olaf has a daughter. She gets sort of fostered out to this farmer and his wife, and basically told that she's their kid. And then Helgi is raiding in Olaf's lands several years later, a decade or so, whatever it is, decade and a half. And he finds this girl, who's supposed to be the daughter of these farmers. And he basically is like, yeah, you're pretty sexy, I'm in love with you, why don't you come back and we'll get married. Only later, several years later, after they've been married, does Queen Olaf come out and be like, oh, BT dubs, that's your daughter. that you've been having sex with. So it's pretty, it's a mess. It's a whole big thing. So we've got that stuff going on. And again, dynastic conflict, etc., etc. The other big thing that we get, I'm gonna, I think, skip a little bit later. No, I'm just gonna go with this bit. So it's dynastic politics all the way down throughout the play, throughout the saga. But the other thing that we have that kind of breaks up the action is we have these heroes, very bizarre heroes in many cases, who almost across the board have something supernatural about them. So one bit, we've got this interesting component, and this is one of the sort of mort d'Arthur kind of things. At one point, King Helgi is in bed over Yule. I mean, we would now call it Christmas. He's in bed. He's like, I don't want to have feasts and whatnot. I'm sad because my daughter, whom I was in love with, is actually my daughter, and I can't kind of have her as my queen now. So he's moping around. And this hideous old woman comes and knocks on his door and is basically like, hey, give me shelter. It's, I'm a hideous old woman, but whatever. It's a good thing for you to do. And he's like, fine, whatever. You can come in and, I don't know, you can be here and stay out of the cold and what all. At which point, she's like, aha, because you've been kind to me, I am actually a beautiful young elf woman, and we'll have sex, and I will give birth to Skuld, who will be your daughter. And will end up being the villain of the piece. So in this way, we sort of have this Morgana and Mordred kind of thing, as you get in Arthurian legends, where you have this magical figure who sort of tricks the ruler into having sex with her, and then the product of that union eventually becomes the sort of downfall of the great hero of the piece. In this case, Skuld becomes the one who basically destroys King Hrolf later on. So eventually, King Hrolf is born, and he becomes king, as you do. And he gets this reputation for being a great king. And actually, we have this passage here, because we have a guy named Svipdag, who his sons want to go and join Hrolf, want to go and become champions for him. And it's Svip. Is the father. Svipdag is one of the sons who wants to go and become a champion. And when Svipdag asks, what is King Hrolf like, his father answered, I have heard that King Hrolf is open-handed and generous, and so trustworthy and particular about his friends that his equal cannot be found. He withholds neither gold nor treasure from nearly everyone who wants or needs them. He is handsome in looks, powerful in deeds, and a worthy opponent. The fairest of men, Hrolf is fierce with the greedy, yet gentle, and accommodating with the unpretentious and modest. Toward all those who do not threaten him, he is the most humble of men, responding with equal mildness to both the powerful and the poor. Hrolf is so great that his name will not be forgotten as long as the world remains inhabited. He has exacted tribute from all kings who are near him, for everyone is willing to serve him. So this is the depiction of the ideal Viking ruler, basically. Hrolf is much like Arthur, who's the idealized chivalric ruler. Hrolf embodies the values that are most important to this society. Now, we've got this interesting bit, because there's a hero named Bjorn, and I'm giving you, a lot of this that I'm explaining seems kind of fragmented, and it kind of is, but all of these people are in some way interconnected. So there's this hero called Bjorn, and Bjorn is associated with a bear. There's a queen named Hvit, who they brought back from like northern Scandinavia, northern Sweden, I think, to potentially marry the king. Hvit tries to seduce Bjorn, who's like, nah, son. He doesn't call her son because she's a queen, but you know what I mean. And then basically she's like, well, I'm going to use my magic and turn you into a bear. You're going to destroy all of the king's cattle and livestock and horses and whatnot, and then they're going to kill you. Which is basically what happens. But there is a woman, a freeman's daughter named Bera, who's also associated with a bear, and she falls in love with Bjorn, even though he's sometimes transformed into a bear. And they have an affair, she gets pregnant, and then basically Bjorn's like, all right, so they're about to kill me. When they do, they're going to cook and eat me, and you cannot eat any of me. Do not eat the bear. Bear is off limits for you because you're pregnant. And if you eat some of the bear meat, the kids will be different. The queen basically forces her to eat a small amount of bear meat. She tries to eat as little as she can. She tries to resist as much as she's able to. But the queen forces her to eat a little bit. And so she has 3 kids. Elk Frody, whose top half is a person, human. Bottom half is an elk. I think just 2 feet, though. I don't think it's like a centaur deal. I think it's more like a satyr, but with an elk. Then there's Thorir Houndsfoot, who has a hound's foot. He has a dog's foot. And then there is Bodvar. Bodvar. Bodvar, who is associated with bear, but doesn't apparently have any sort of direct, animal parts of him. And these 3 brothers have some crazy adventures. Elk Frody decides that he is going to basically go and become a bandit. And so he lives in the mountains and steals from people. And his other brothers are like, that's not cool, man. But Elk Frody's like, meh, fuck it. I've got the bottom half of an elk. I'm going to do what I want. Then Thorir becomes the king of the gods, or the Yods, which is this. I mean, that's the same group that Beowulf comes from in Beowulf. And apparently, the way that he becomes the king is that the Yods have a giant chair, and whoever fills the chair best becomes king. And so Thorir goes and sits in this chair, and they're like, hey man, that chair fits you. You're our king now. Make of that whatever you will. Bodvar, by contrast, decides that he's going to become a hero for King Hrolf. And basically he goes and he's like, I'm the toughest dude. I will fight anybody, or I will fight all of you, and I will win. And he does. And so that's how he becomes Hrolf's champion. But one of the there's this interesting bit where on the way to King Hrolf's hall, Bodvar stays the night with an elderly couple, and the farmer's wife keeps crying, and as she does so, Bodvar says, "Why are you crying, you simple old woman?" And the old woman said, "My husband and I have one son who is named Hot. One day he went to the stronghold to amuse himself, but the king's men taunted him. He could not stand up to such conduct, so the men took him and stuck him into a pile of bones. It is their habit at mealtimes, when they are finished gnawing the meat from a bone, to throw it at him. Sometimes if the bone hits him, he is badly injured. Whether he is alive or dead I do not know, but I ask this reward from you in return for my hospitality, that you throw smaller bones at him rather than larger ones, that is, if he is not already dead." Bodvar answered, "I will do as you request, but I do not think it is warrior-like to strike people with bones, or to harm children or men of small account." And there's an endnote about this that says, "Throwing bones was apparently one of the rowdier games played at feasts, and killing by bone throwing is specifically listed as an offense in a number of medieval Scandinavian law codes. Sven Agesson, who wrote in the 12th century, reports that, according to the law of the Danish king Knut, any bodyguard who broke the law was required to sit lower than the other bodyguards, thus allowing the others to pelt him with bones." So that was apparently a great time in medieval Scandinavia. Just chucking bones at people, but don't kill them. So Bodvar goes, and he sees Hot in the bone pile, and he pulls him out, and Hot's like, "No, man, I just built up my bone defenses. They weren't going to be able to hit me with bones, and now I'm out. And I'm vulnerable." And Bodvar's like, "No, man, don't even worry. I've got this." And so they go, and basically the other warriors, King Hrolf's warriors, are like, "Why did you take Hot out of the bone pile? We wanted to throw more bones at him." And Bodvar is like, "I will throw a bone at you and kill you." Which he does. He kills one of the warriors with a bone. King Hrolf is not super pleased with that until they're like, "Yeah, we were throwing bones at this guy." And then Hrolf is like, "Well, stop doing that. Also, this guy's my new best friend, Bodvar." Bodvar then kills a sort of demon ghoul something, sort of in the vein of Grendel from Beowulf, and makes Hot drink that guy's blood, which then, Hot is then, super strong and powerful, and he decides not to take revenge on anybody who threw bones at him, so they changed his name to Hjalti the Magnanimous, and he becomes one of Hrolf's major champions. There's some more fighting, general invasion of Sweden and things like this. And then, toward the end, Skuld and her husband are like, time for Hrolf to die. So they raise a massive army, and this is where we get the kind of Lord of the Rings part, because they're like, we're bringing an army of goblins and the dead and what all fucking manner of enchanted shit here. And they basically lay siege to Hrolf's hall. And initially Hrolf's just like, meh, I'm not concerned. And then the champions are like, maybe time to get concerned, because shit's going down. And so they have a huge battle. And, interestingly enough, in this huge battle, Bodvar is absent, even though he's the greatest of Hrolf's champions. But there is a giant bear that's just rampaging around the battlefield and just destroying everybody in its path. Hjalti goes back to the king's chamber, and it says, where he found Bodvar sitting idle. Hjalti spoke, "How long shall we wait for this most famous of men? It is a major disgrace that you are not on your feet. You should be testing the strengths of your arm, which are as strong as a bear's. Get up now, Bodvar Bjarki, my master, otherwise I will burn down the house and you in it. There is dishonor in this conduct for such a champion as you. While the king endangers his life for us, you lose the renown that you have for so long enjoyed." This brings Vodvar out of his trance, at which point the bear that was on the battlefield disappears because Vodvar had been sort of spectrally controlling the bear. And the tide of battle turns. Because when Vodvar was controlling this bear, Skuld was not able to use any of her witchcraft. But once that trance is broken, Skuld is able to deploy all kinds of magic, including a giant boar that starts rampaging around and killing Hrolf's forces, and she sort of brings her dead soldiers back to life to continue the battle, etc., etc. And so, Hrolf and all of his champions fall in glorious battle. And so again, we've got that sort of... I mean, we see that in Le Mort d'Arthur. The champions and the king fall in battle, and that's their sort of glorious reward at the end. It's a weird book. It's a weird saga, but it's interesting.